The revelation left the room unusually still. Nobody tried to make sense of it immediately. Angad stood where he was, unable to understand what he had just heard. BK quietly walked out to the veranda and remained there for a long while, looking into the streets beyond the guest house. SD followed him a few moments later. Neither of them spoke. Some questions refused to yield answers the moment they were born. BK eventually broke the silence. He asked SD to immediately establish contact with Dr. Matthew Varghese at NIMHANS, Bangalore. The entire case history was to be forwarded through Commissioner Maya Madhavan's official email, and he wanted the psychiatrist's preliminary opinion at the earliest. It was the first time since the investigation had begun that BK looked beyond conventional investigation for answers. While SD attended to the call, Angad remained quietly watching BK. There was uncertainty on his face, but it carried none of the fear that had begun to weigh upon the others. He simply waited, trusting that BK would know what to do next. BK walked towards him, placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder, and gently asked him to remain strong. It was all BK could offer at that moment. By the time SD returned, Dr. Varghese had agreed to examine the reports as soon as they reached him. BK decided not to lose any more time. There was one place he wanted to visit before the sun set into the darkness. The three of them drove towards the abandoned concrete pipe where Angad had been staying. The journey passed almost entirely in silence. Angad occasionally looked outside with the quiet contentment of someone traveling with people he trusted. BK, however, found himself watching the young artist more than the road ahead. The investigation had slowly reached a point where understanding Angad had become far more important than questioning him. The vehicle finally came to a halt. Angad stepped out immediately and led them towards the place he had been calling home. There was no hesitation in his stride. Everything about his movements suggested that he expected to find Balika waiting exactly where he had left her. The place looked no different from when BK had first seen it. The abandoned concrete pipe still stood where it always had. Around it lay only the quiet neglect of time. Two uneven mounds of loose earth rested nearby, while a faded sari, worn down by the weather, remained tied to the ceiling of the pipe that had silently watched over the place for years. Angad smiled. Without the slightest pause, he began speaking to Balika as though she had been waiting for his return. He spoke about the day, about traveling with BK, about the people they had met, and about questions they had tried to answer. His words flowed with the ease of a conversation that had never been interrupted. BK and SD stood a short distance away. Neither attempted to interrupt him. Neither exchanged a word. Their attention was no longer on the place. It was entirely on Angad. After a while, Angad turned towards BK and insisted that he acknowledge Balika's presence. For a brief moment, BK found himself caught in a situation unlike anything he had encountered during his years as an investigator. Choosing kindness over confrontation, he gently steered himself through the moment and reassured Angad that Balika was indeed a beautiful young woman. The answer was enough. Angad smiled with quiet satisfaction before turning back towards Balika, continuing a conversation that only he could hear. A little later, he agreed to accompany BK for a few days. He walked inside the concrete pipe and began collecting his belongings. One bag was discarded almost immediately after a strong stench rose from it. He picked another instead, folded a few clothes into it, added a small box of colored chalks, and gathered a few personal belongings that lay scattered around the narrow space. Once everything was ready, Angad stepped out carrying the bag over his shoulder. Before leaving, he turned once again towards the empty space beside the tree. He told Balika that he would be accompanying BK to help him solve an important case and that he might not return for a few days. He then asked her to take the television back to her house before quietly walking away. BK and SD followed him in silence. Neither looked back. By the time they returned to the guest house, Maya had already arrived. Balaton had quietly arranged tea and snacks for everyone. But very little was spoken around the table. The events of the evening had left each of them occupied by thoughts they had not yet found words for. BK finally looked towards Maya and quietly indicated that he wanted to speak with her alone.
Where stories begin.